welcome to a VCCircle podcast. With me today to discuss the logistics tech space in the country is Mithun Srivatsa of logistics tech startup Blowhorn. Mithun, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours as well. Could you start by giving us a bit of an introduction to yourself as well as Blowhorn? What the company is, what it does, how it sort of seeking to differentiate itself within the space.
Sure. So I'm Mithun. I'm the CEO and founder of Blowhorn. I'm a logistician by training, and I have studied in NIT Nagpur, and post which I did my MBA abroad. And I spent 7.5 years with this company called AP Moller Maersk, which is the world's largest conglomerate when it comes to shipping and logistics, right? So having spent a lot of time with them, I thought that post my business school degree, I thought I should come back to Bharat and build something which can truly catalyze a certain business, which I understand quite well, which is logistics, right? So Blowhorn, when we started off Blowhorn in 2014, our vision was very simple. We wanted to solve the toughest logistics problems, right? So in Bharat and in India back then, most of the logistics problems existed in the last mile in the intracity space. So we wanted to solve the more tougher problems rather than focus on the bigger market, right? So as a logistician, I had worked in international shipping, I'd worked in national trucking, right? I'd worked in a bunch of things, but I thought that this problem is going to be the biggest constraint when it comes to, let's say, growing some of the sunrise sectors for e-commerce, or way back it was not as big as it was right now. So in 2013, 2014, when we started this, right? So back then we thought that this will be a catalyst for the growth of many new businesses. And if you look at the Indian retail story itself, we thought that there are many ways Indian retail will grow, and it would be a gold rush at some point. And we wanted to build the space for the gold rush business, right? So we wanted to be a logistics platform which helps everybody move everything from 1 gram to 1 ton within the city, right? And we wanted to focus on building a full stack service, which means not just transportation, but also we wanted to work in the warehousing space. And we wanted to kind of build a world-class technology system, which kind of connects our transportation stack and our warehousing stack, right? So this was the vision which we set out to build. And I'm pretty glad to say that we are almost there. I think we are pretty proud of where we have come from.
Could you give us an idea about the kind of numbers that Blowhorn has seen in terms of its revenue, or even in terms of its projections, how much they've grown since you were set up?
Yeah, sure. So I think we started in 2014 August, as I mentioned. So we have just closed about 6 years now. In terms of revenues, I think we are clocking well over 100 crores, okay, in the last FY. So this year, I think year on year, we tend to grow about 2x or so. So I see that this will be even despite COVID. I think the good thing about COVID is, while the investors sit at home investing in tech startups, or while a lot of us are working from home, ordering food on Swiggy or whatever. I mean, we are the guys keeping the supply chains rolling in the background, right? So this is a business which is kind of, I would like to call a roti kapda makan business. So this business had a little bit of a dent initially when the initial lockdown happened, because there were completely structural reasons where trucks were not allowed to move at all. But once they eased that up, I think this has been growing at a fairly large clip. So that is the insight that I can give you, that Blowhorn is on a growth path, and I think we usually double in size every year, and we anticipate to grow quite well this year as well, despite COVID.
That is the interesting. That is the key phrase, that despite COVID, because since COVID has affected us here in India, the logistics sector, regardless of whether you are a traditional logistics player or a new age logistics tech player, the logistics sector as a whole has become ever more important, like you mentioned. I want to ask you, how exactly do you feel the logistics sector itself has responded? I mean, yeah, there was an initial bump, but a lot of those bumps related to the fact that a lot of players could not procure passes to move between states, or a lot of players were not suddenly able to deal with the amount of demand on their fleets. But how do you feel overall that the logistics sector has responded to the crisis that the pandemic caused?
So, see, whether you're a tech-enabled logistics player or whether you're a normal logistics player, the meta philosophy of logistics is contingency management.
Okay.
We are in the contingency management business, right? So when we are in the contingency management business, what I mean by that is, let's say you order 500 times on Amazon, or any service which you like, or it's a big basket or wherever, right? The 500 times when they deliver on time, you don't give them a compliment. But the one time when things go wrong, I think people get upset. So this is the business that we are in from the get-go, right? So the DNA of a logistics company itself is in contingency management. So the way we looked at this, at least at Blowhorn, was, hey, this was one more contingency which was slightly different. Okay. The biggest advantage that we had over traditional logistics companies is the fact that we had built a tech in such a way that we could do remote work from the day we started. Okay. So we had very liberal leave policies. We had very liberal work from home policies, right? So we were always built for remote work from day one. So that was a big advantage for us. Now, some of them who did not depend on technology and who depended more on manual kind of interventions where they needed people to be on the ground, etc., it affected them a little bit more. But over time, once things normalized and once this things settled, right, in our heads that, okay, this is going to be around for a while and we need to find a way to work around this, I think people decided to kind of put their vehicles and their resources back on the ground as quickly as possible. So that I think is the key thing. So there are two things here. So the first thing is the technology, and the other thing is the meta itself on which logistics is based, which is contingency management. So that gives a DNA for most of us to think of this as one more contingency.
From a technology perspective, did the technology manage to hold up its end of the bargain in this crisis during this pandemic? Has the technology managed to live up to what a lot of companies, Blowhorn included, said that it would be able to do?
Absolutely. I think, in fact, technology, I mean, if I have to say, it really saved us, right? Technology was the savior at this time, right? And what happened, at least in our case, I'll tell you, right? So the moment the lockdown happened, within the first 3 or 4 days, we had dropped to 15% of our business as usual. Even though we were a regular, we were a business which should have thrived during the pandemic, right? And 3 weeks later, we kind of scaled up to about 50-60% of business as usual, right? And the reason we were able to scale up was technology gave resilience to us. So if you're in the logistics business, you're in the contingency management business, and you're in the, let's say, transportation management business, the key thing you need is visibility of your resources. You need to see supply chain readiness, right? And you need to see supply chain flexibility also. So what do I mean by this, right? Supply chain readiness, which is, how much of your supply is ready to go out right now. You need to be able to see that in real time, because most of the decisions you're taking in a contingency is triage-based decisions, right? So let's say a hospital needs 100 trucks right now. You would want to send it because, see, at that point in time when the outbreak hit us, we were not thinking of Blowhorn, we were thinking of India. We were thinking of what we can do as a company to help other companies, right? Others who are servicing, right? All the first line responders and so on and so forth, right? So for us, technology helped us in a big way, and technology helped a lot of companies in a big way to first assess their resources and resource readiness. Second, they got full supply chain visibility in terms of seeing, okay, where exactly are those vehicles? So these guys are ready, but where are my vehicles, right? And the third thing is they were able to deploy things in a very precise fashion, especially companies which had world-class technology were able to deploy all these resources in a precise fashion and actually take care and actually kind of ride a little bit of the minor tailwind which came during COVID, and scale up a little faster and use it to their advantage. So I think technology was the biggest catalyst during this time.
The reason I asked specifically about the technology is because a lot of investors have also been watching the logistics tech space very keenly for the last couple of years now. I mean, we've had funding rounds for almost every startup that operates in the space, including Blowhorn. I believe you raised funding from Trifecta a few months back. What I wanted to ask is, there will obviously be some companies that do not perform as well as others. And do you, in 6 months or even a year from now, seeing a bit of consolidation happening in the startup side of the space, or whether it's a bigger startup buying up a smaller one, or even a strategic player coming in and saying, "Okay, I'd like to take over your technology. Here's an offer from my end."
Yeah, so I think there have been strategic plays, right, where a company has become captive to a larger company already in some form or fashion, right? So if you look at Porter had a strategic investor in the form of Mahindra Group, right, in one of their previous rounds. If you look at Shadowfax, if you look at all the PR around Shadowfax also lately, I think for all practical purposes, they are an extension of Flipkart's grocery arm, right? And Flipkart made a large investment in Shadowfax and kind of they are captive now. Shadowfax is captive to Flipkart's growth and so on and so forth. So I already see that happening. So it has always happened and it will continue to happen. And even if you look at the larger companies, let's say the deliveries of the world, etc. I mean, they have even acquired companies like Aramex, right? Aramex operations in India was acquired by Delivery. So I actually think that play is on. The play is ripe. We had multiple companies approaching us in the past few months, looking at like an acquisition, acqui-hire opportunities, which we are evaluating. So I think the time is always ripe for consolidation. But in these 3 to 6 months, has there been an uptick? I haven't seen that actually come out. I think it's been fairly normal. I don't think there's been a big change, simply because I think at least in the logistics space, more or less, most businesses were running mostly as usual after 2 months. So that's why I think it settled down. But if the lockdowns continued for longer, I think we would have seen a lot more uptick in the space.
Do you see, you mentioned that Blowhorn has also been approached by some companies for a possible acqui-hire or acquisition.
Yes.
Do you see yourself entertaining such a proposal?
Well, absolutely, right. So we don't have any fixed mindset on how Blowhorn should grow, right? Okay. We'll be opportunistic in terms of how we need to grow aggressively, right? So we will figure out what comes our way. But the one thing I remember, right? So one of the electives that I took during my MBA was mergers and acquisitions. And I remember one key lesson from the M&A elective is 90% of all M&As fail because there's no cultural fit. Right? So that is the key thing. And that is something that we are very mindful of, right? And whenever we are making assessments for a lot of these companies.
Yeah, it's actually interesting you mentioned the cultural fit, because at our recent mergers and acquisition summit, we had an entire panel dedicated to the human cost of mergers and acquisitions, and the cultural fit was perhaps the biggest point that we touched on. I want to take that a bit forward. Can you tell me a bit about Blowhorn's culture, specifically in terms of how you approach product development and how you approach utilizing the funding that you receive, because you have some extremely big investors. I mean, you have Shirate, you have Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, and even Draper Associates, and those are some really big names. Can you give us an idea about Blowhorn's culture with respect to all of that?
Sure. So I think so. Let us look at it from how the investors have shaped our culture. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing is we are really lucky to have investors all across the board who give us a free hand in how we need to run the company, and they kind of guide us from time to time and double down on us whenever we need, right? So I think even now we are like well placed financially, and we have a good enough runway, to kind of see this through. Did we have to take some measures to kind of safeguard ourselves? Yes, we did. We took some salary cuts, etc., just to ensure that we are safeguarded against unknown unknowns. But overall, I think we are still well capitalized for now, and we tend to see a lot of support from our investors. So the culture they give is the culture that is reflected in the company. So there's a lot of autonomy, right? In terms of the product itself, I think there are two ways, right? So there are certain products where we find that the market doesn't exist yet for that, right? So we take our time, we build it, and we keep it in cold storage for a while. And when the market is ready, depending on our metrics in unit economics, etc., we activate these products, right? But in terms of the other investor thing which they drive is a lot on impact and giving, right? So, for example, during COVID, one of the key things which came out was, our investors, they truly kind of, charmed us. What they did was they set up a fund to help our drivers so that we can do some minimum payments for drivers who had absolutely no work, right? For those 2 months, we set up a fund, right? They arranged donations for us so that we could buy medical insurance for all our drivers, right? I think they did some exceptional work for us. So that is the other thing that comes through in the way we think about the products, right? We are always thinking about the supply side. We are always thinking about our driver community. We are always thinking about our fleet owner community. We are always thinking, how can we ensure that their earnings are increasing constantly? How can we ensure that there's positive impact in their lives? So all of these things, I think, are influenced by the investor group that we have. So we have a lot of autonomy. We have like class leading technology also, because we have some very good guidance from our board. And also, I think on the impact piece, we really care about our driver community, and it shows, because we are possibly the only company in the space to have built this business without giving minimum guarantees.
Before I mention, before I ask you about Blowhorn's own product and business strategy for the future, I would like to ask you, we've already spoken a bit about acquisitions, but the flip side of that is further funding. You had a venture debt round a couple of months back, maybe more.
Sure.
Are you looking at raising more equity funding in the future? I mean, are there any talks on for that?
So yes, I think every founder is constantly looking to fundraise. I think most of them are, and I think this is a great time for us, because I think there's a lot of traction, and there's a lot of tailwinds kind of powering us. So I think we are looking out for a fundraise.
Is there any timeline? Is there any specific timeline that you're looking at for this?
I mean, if I have to be pragmatic about this, I would say over the next 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, give us an idea about what your plans, what Blowhorn's plans for the future are in terms of both strategy and you mentioned that you keep a lot of product ideas in mind and in cold storage till the market is ready for them. Are some of these products going to be brought to the market in the near future?
Absolutely. I think one of the key things that we have built out now is, we had an Uber for moving goods kind of a model, right? So where we had a transportation stack which would do a lot of fixed and spot kind of deliveries, etc., for a lot of small businesses and large businesses, right? What we kind of innovated on was trying to reinvent how fulfillment is done, right? The warehousing part of the business, and we have a very, very possibly one of the best in the world in terms of how we are thinking about kind of deploying technology in an asset-light way to still build a micro warehousing kind of a network across cities so that we can do super fast deliveries, right? So I think this is really an innovation, and we are pretty excited about deploying this. This is something that we have built out as a product, and we'll be talking about it further in the next few months to come. In terms of our future plans itself, in terms of, we see a lot of gaps in the logistics space, right, in India, and a lot of it is in the smaller towns, right? So is there a way to kind of impact them that could be interesting? Is there a way to think, how to expand faster to multiple cities? That is something that we are constantly innovating. Or there are other areas to think about, be it autonomy, be it electric vehicles, right? What are the other trends that we are seeing which we need to adopt, right? So those are all the things that we are keeping a close watch on. One of the things we are very, very excited about is EVs and electrification of the supply chain, right? We actually think that the commercial vehicle space is ripe and ready for this disruption, because the biggest operating cost for most of us in this space is fuel. And if you can bring the fuel cost down by a margin of, by a factor of 2 or 3, I think there's a definite chance for disruption. And I think logistics companies, new age logistics tech companies will be at the forefront of leading change in electrifying the commercial logistics supply chain.
Especially last mile logistics company like Blowhorn.
Absolutely. So we have set a personal target for ourselves, and we have a very senior, respected resource leading this. His name is Mr. Gautam Seshadri. So he's kind of leading the charge here, where we are trying to kind of partner with a bunch of EV companies, trying to see how we can kind of catalyze this positive change for Bharat.
And finally, I'd like to ask you, is there any specific trend that you see rising up in the larger logistics space in the next couple of years? I mean, we are living with the pandemic one way or the other, but apart from that, or even influenced by that, what are the sort of trends that you see coming up in the next 1 or 2 years that a lot of companies will have to take on?
See, I think history is a good teacher for this, right? So last time there was a SARS pandemic in China, right? I think in about a decade before, easily, right? So what happened after that was that suddenly e-commerce started growing, because a lot of people were at home and they started, utilizing their mobile devices to start buying more, and e-commerce took off, right? So we see e-retail, we see O2O, we see all these things. They're at the precipice of taking off. And in fact, COVID has actually pushed people beyond that. I'll give you an example. Like my mother, who is 65 now, she just learned how to order things online during the shutdown, and now she orders groceries every day online, right? I have a lot of relatives whom I speak to. They also speak the same thing, right? They're all very comfortable now ordering online, and they had a lot of myths about the quality, the pricing will be very high. All these myths are getting broken slowly, right? So I think there will be a massive uptick in the number of online consumers. That is the prediction. So what are the second order effects of this, right? So logistics needs to keep up pace with this, right? We are already seeing Reliance Jio kind of making like crazy growth in the grocery retail space, right? We are seeing Big Basket, etc., all of them leading the charge in grocery. Swiggy and Flipkart coming up with super fast deliveries of as low as 45 minutes, right? So we are seeing a lot of trends around adoption, and we are seeing one common trend, which is speed. We think that more and more people want things faster, and a lot of them are willing to pay for it. So we are seeing that trend as well. So these are the two trends, I think, which will guide a lot of insights for a lot of other affiliated businesses, including logistics, which is increased e-commerce adoption and increased online adoption, and a need for speed, So that I think will become pretty commonplace.
When you say, just as a final follow-up, when you say e-commerce adoption, do you also include direct-to-consumer brands in that? Because we have seen a lot of D2C
A-
brands sort of coming up in the last few
Absolutely,
months.
absolutely. I think D2C has been an amazing. It will be an amazing India story if D2C really scales up, because I believe India has a lot of homegrown brands lying in waiting. Every time I
Mhm.
open Instagram, for example, I see this new brand. They're selling some different healthy food, or they're selling some clothing, etc. And these are all like fantastic homegrown brands run by very passionate founders. So I see D2C happening and scaling up in a big way. I see O2O moving from being a fad to becoming mainstream. I see
Mhm.
social commerce really taking off. Okay. And especially and the rocket fuel for social commerce will be tier two, tier three, getting more comfortable with online buying, right? So
Mhm.
I see all of these things coming in tandem. So when I mention e-commerce, possibly that's not the right way. Let me say e-retail or online retail as the term, which
Mhm.
encompasses all of these things, right? All of these things I believe will take off in a big way.
So no matter how you slice it, then the future for last mile and the logistics sector as a whole looks pretty bright. Mr. Srivatsa, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us.
Thank you so much for having me there. Thank you again. Take care.
Thank you.